Hi there, it's Elise Brunelle. I'm back again, Executive Director of the Vermont Symphony Orchestra, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be chatting for about 20 minutes with James Burton, who has joined us from Boston and is conducting our concerts this weekend at the Flynn in Burlington and at the Paramount in Rutland, October 29th and 30th. Welcome to Burlington, James.
Thank you so much. It's a beautiful place. I've just had a chance to go for a little stroll and enjoy the ambience and see a little bit of the lake. And yeah, it's lovely to be here. Looking forward to a week of music making.
Great. Well, for those people who may not know James, he's currently the Boston Symphony Orchestra choral director and also a Tanglewood Summer Chorus director, and he's also the head of the, I might get this a little wrong, orchestral studies at Boston University. I hope I got that all
That's
correct.
right. Yeah, yeah.
But why don't you just give us a brief walkthrough of how you came to that? What's your background?
Well, I have. I mean, firstly, it's just wonderful that this week we can feature the VSO chorus, and I know that they are looking forward to coming to sing. And we share a love of singing. I've done a lot of singing in my background. I began my life as a chorister at Westminster Abbey, having grown up in a musical family where we sang and we made music all the time. I thought that was perfectly normal, of course, and not every family does that. But I was lucky to have the chance to study at Westminster Abbey and then be a choral scholar in Cambridge. So I was surrounded by singing and choruses and choirs in all sorts of ways, and really have been ever since. While I was at university, I took an enormous interest in conducting and had played the cello in my early years. I'm still not that we're meant to be to have favorites in the orchestra, but I do have a soft spot for the cello section always. And that was after about a decade of playing in string quartets and orchestras myself. I wanted to try and step forward to see what it was like on the podium. And I ended up studying conducting in Baltimore in Maryland with the great Frederick Krausnitz and then with Gustav Meyer, both who have sadly passed away now, but they were both real sort of gurus of the conducting world. And in America, the study of conducting was taken very seriously, really from the middle of the last century. Conducting is, of course, relatively a recent art form. And in the UK, when I was growing up, there weren't that many opportunities to study it formally. So I was delighted to get a chance to study in Baltimore. And then I returned to London and worked in all sorts of institutions. I worked freelance. I conducted a West End musical at one point. I
Which
carried
one?
on. It was based on Charles Dickens's Hard Times, which is a particularly
Oh,
dark novel, which might not
musical
seem
about
like
hard times,
it would not make sense. But it actually was brilliantly conceived because it was a show within a show and it was performed by a circus troupe. So the story was told, but with that element of performance all the way through it. And I spent, I think it was 170 performances in the Theatre Royal Haymarket, which was, for a young
I
conductor,
know
that was
that.
brilliant training
Yep.
for me and a wonderful, just an enormously wonderfully enjoyable experience. And I've been conducting ever since, and now enjoying my time at Boston with the Boston Symphony. I've had lots of invitations to join the Boston Pops as their conductor as well, which has been really brilliant. And to see how the sort of slightly lighter side of music is nurtured in that institution. I mean, I'm sure that the Boston Pops is world famous for its recordings, and I have a broad repertoire, so that seemed a natural fit for me to do conducting with them. And also our chorus at the Boston Symphony, the Tanglewood Festival Chorus, they sing regularly with both the symphony and the Boston Pops, so it's all sort of part of a happy family in Boston. So yes, it's been a busy few years in Boston, slightly curtailed by the pandemic, of course, but yes, super to be here now.
You and I met, I think, online about 2 years ago, and we've been talking through all this, preparing for him.
It's been
But
a long one.
let me jump, just staying on the conducting and staying on choral conducting. So last weekend you joined us for it was almost all of our chorus members together, and they got to know you a bit. And one of the things that's interesting about this concert is that it's a consortium of singers from different choral groups. The bulk of it is the VSO Chorus, which is a volunteer organization, but we're also bringing in singers from the Montpelier Community Gospel Chorus, from Albany Pro Musica, from Counterpoint Chorus, and I'm interested. You walk into a room of a bunch of people who may or may not have been singing, perhaps even for a long time, much less together. That's very different than working with people who have been singing together regularly. How do you approach that, this situation that you had with our chorus?
Um, well, I think there's two things to say here, which is firstly about singing in general, which is the great thing about it is that you can do it at any level. Some people will say, "Oh, I don't sing, whatever," but I'm sure they do. Maybe just in the shower privately, at home, not doing the dishes, whatever. Most people have music in their ears, and the great thing with choruses is you can join one having had no experience at all. And unlike instrumental music, where the implication is that you really do need some tuition, and that tuition is normally one-to-one, so it becomes something that's got a cost attached. But singing is normally, can be a cheap activity. So if there's anyone out there who wants to try it, just go sign up. And the other point is about bringing together different groups of singers into an environment. And I think with this, it's about the music, and we spent the afternoon just focused on the music and trying to have a singularity of approach. So wherever someone's from, whatever experience they've got, by focusing on particular moments in the music, I can sort of blend their voices together and have a singularity of interpretation of the text, which is great when you've got good words to sing. We've got words written by our composer, Matthew Evan Taylor, and also Walt Whitman, who wrote fantastically singable and brilliantly exciting, colorful words that were, I think, written to be spoken out loud. So his poetry is full of rhetoric, which suits musical setting. So bringing the singers through the same sort of portal, if you like, so we all walk in the same direction and have the same approach. That's really what I was going for.
The poetry that you bring up is interesting, because I don't think I had realized until quite recently that actually all three pieces in the first half of the concert have poetry as their background. You mentioned Matthew Evan Taylor, our composer of the world premiere we're doing. He wrote the words for his piece. Walt Whitman for Vaughan Williams' piece, but even the strings piece in the middle has a little E.E. Cummings background. So why don't you walk us through a little bit about the first half of the concert? What is the
Okay.
audience going to experience?
So the starting point for choosing this program was Matthew's piece, which was being rehearsed, and it had been programmed and finished back in 2020. And sadly, the pandemic intervened. So I know when we first spoke, that was on the agenda for this concert, and we wanted to feature it. And it's funny because the piece and the words and the journey it takes have turned into something remarkably poignant, given what's happened in the intervening time. The idea that there is, no matter the sort of darkness or uncertainty in life, there is light and positivity at the end of the tunnel. And Matthew's piece takes us through that journey. And so the idea of sort of darkness and light chimes beautifully with the Vaughan Williams piece. This month is Vaughan Williams' 150th birthday, which was something I personally wanted to celebrate. He's a composer that I admire hugely, not just for his output, but also his outlook on music making. Partly going back to what I was referring to about singing, he was a conductor of professional choruses and orchestras, but also he collected folk music, and that informed the way he went about his musical career. He created the English hymnal in 1906, which transformed congregational singing in churches in the UK. And he worked every year with an amateur chorus doing Bach's Matthew Passion, and started choirs and festivals and so on. And he thought music should be part of everyday life, as do I. And so I think it's great that we can feature one of his pieces. The piece is called Toward the Unknown Region, with this appeal from Whitman in his text to walk out with me to the soul. So it's a sort of almost an internal dialogue, a musing, and it's got a dare at the heart of it, which is always exciting. I think it appeals to our sort of youthful sense of endeavor, and that sort of sense of the intrepid. And Vaughan Williams' music perfectly matches that, and it has a steady, calm, somber opening, but as the music gains confidence, it just begins to surge forward, and it's got this unassailable sense of triumph at the end, which I thought the audience would enjoy. I thought the chorus would enjoy singing. For the orchestra, it's brilliantly written. It's really lush. It's a bit like playing a sort of slightly simple Strauss tone poem for the orchestra, which is always a pleasure for them. And in between these two pieces, we've got a string piece by Augusta Reed Thomas, a living American composer. And her piece is based on a choral work which she wrote about 15 years ago. And it's based on an E.E. Cummings poem. Of course, the punctuation of the original poem is really interesting because all it has in punctuation is parentheses, which makes reading it very sort of tricky. But the poem concerns a relationship, and it's not quite sure whether that's a romantic relationship or not, but it's got a similar sort of internal dialogue to it, like the Whitman poem. And it focuses on warmth, on sun, on light. And so if the two pieces either side of it are a journey towards something positive, Augusta Reed Thomas's piece is actually potentially the point of arrival, with this incredibly delicate, just string texture. It's only 5-6 minutes, but it's a beautifully crafted little piece, which I thought it would be nice to feature in this concert.
I actually reached out to her a couple of months ago when I knew we were programming this, and it's just fantastic to be always programming living composers, because you can do things like reach out to them and say, we're doing this piece, and by the end of an email string, we're swapping recipes with each other. And just another person in music, a lovely person. I'm wondering how, had you programmed her before? Where did you?
I've actually done one of her other pieces. It was a choral piece. And that was a beautiful work called The Rewaking, which I did last year in Boston, just as our chorus there was coming back to life. And the words were remarkably poignant and appropriate for a group of people who were just sort of beginning to regrow their garden, as it were. And yeah. So that was very, very nice. And it's actually quite a similar style of piece where the textures are built up, parts are featured, but it's not melodically conceived. There's always a beautiful sense of overlapping harmonies to it as well. It's yeah, I really enjoy her music.
Well, let's jump ahead to the second half of the piece, the meat that is the Dvorak 7. How? Why that? Why did you choose that piece?
Firstly, I think with a first half, just in practical terms, I think with the first half of relatively lesser known pieces, I think it was important for our concert to have something perhaps which the players may have done before, which the audience may know a little. But actually, given that, it's the least played and possibly the least often performed of the late Dvorak symphonies. And in fact, I've done all from the Symphony Number 6, which I find incredibly positive and bright and joyful. The 8th, which is greatly tuneful and pastoral, and I think the 9th is beloved for so many reasons, not least that famous English horn solo, which we all love. But this is a different piece. It's sort of more ambitious in a way, and it starts with a very sort of searching, somber, processional type feeling, and very quickly becomes turbulent. And so the sort of mood of the piece sort of matches what we've already done artistically in the concert. And by the end, we have a wonderful sense of, it's almost like a Beethoven finish to the symphony, where we have a very sort of clear cadence bringing the piece to a conclusion. But he's still not done. He then adds this coda of enormous sort of magnitude, which sort of blows Beethoven out of the water. And the piece was commissioned for the Royal Philharmonic Society in London, which was the same group that had commissioned Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. So I think Dvorak was acutely aware he wanted to write something which was going to have status and stature. So it really feels to me that it's got his whole heart in it, and that he had to write this final page of music. And when we all get there on Saturday night and Sunday afternoon, I think everyone will see that the piece is over, but he then has to sort of say, no, this is really over, and draw the final curtain on the piece. It's a very exciting work. It's got beautiful solos for the woodwind and the horn players especially. And I'm really looking forward to the orchestra being featured, as they should rightly do so, in the second half, and to explore this work together. I think it's a wonderful piece.
And tonight you will meet the orchestra. So you've
Indeed.
been with the chorus tonight, the orchestra, and then yes, this weekend. So I'm just really excited, not only obviously to be in Burlington, but to be able to travel down to Rutland, sort of our second home in Vermont, be at the Paramount and to reach lovers of classical music, choral singers down in that part of this incredible state. So thank you so much for joining me for this Zoom. Looking forward to these concerts, and we're going to keep the weather gorgeous here. Nice, beautiful fall day. And we'll see you this weekend. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Okay.